So, hello everyone once again. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who just joined, welcome to our show. What we'll be discussing today is how to land your first UX job. Crucial topic, right? So we have invited an awesome guest who did that successfully, now has quite a bit of experience in the field, who will share many of her insights about this journey and answer your questions. We'll introduce our wonderful guest in just a few minutes. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of a company called BeginX. What we do is we help people who know UX basics and want to transition into UX. Our program is a part-time UX career accelerator with real mission-driven client projects that provides a guaranteed way to become highly marketable and land a UX role. And unlike most traditional boot camps or career programs, we allow our participants to build real experience, strong real client portfolio, crucial software skills like team collaboration, client stakeholder management, presentation, and master the UX job search and interviewing necessary to land a UX role. And all of this is done in a collaborative and fun environment and under the guidance of industry practitioner mentors from top companies. And I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, but just to give you a little bit of a background for credibility purposes. The company is headquartered in New York City, and we have run many virtual cohorts and helped around 160 people or so by now get hired into UX roles. And we'll tell you a bit more about our virtual program and also make a special announcement closer to the end of the event. And of course, that part is completely optional for you. So here's some of the companies that the grads were hired by. So we've basically seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition. So Lacey, it's great to have you here. Thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate having you here. I'm really excited to have the discussion because I know that you really excelled at this, right? And I think you'll have really awesome insights to share of how you went through this whole journey, right? So really excited.
Sure.
Would you like to briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lacey. I was in your shoes maybe 5 years ago, and it felt like an impossible task. But I was able to get a job after the BeginX program, which was awesome. And since then, I've moved into, I got a job with Dell, and I was able to learn and grow a lot there. And then since then, I've moved into the AR VR space, which has been super exciting. And I've just been learning so much. And yeah, honestly, I just can't wait to hear the questions and to help in any way that I can.
All right. Amazing. Thank you, Lacey. All right. So again, just a quick reminder. If you have a question, please use the Q&A tab. So this way, and I just tweaked this setting again because Zoom keeps resetting it back to not allowing upvotes and not allowing you to see all the questions for some interesting reason. So now you should be able to see everyone else's questions and definitely look at them, review them, and upvote them. This way we can take the most popular ones and address like the most basically important questions that most people care about. And again, just a reminder, we'll make special announcements about the program that we're running closer to the end of the events. And by the way, Lacey, thank you for the kind words. Really appreciate it. I know Lacey went through the program a while ago. And of course, this event is not about the program, right? We'll tell you about it in the end, but this event is about Lacey's journey and her insights that she got along the way and basically helping you understand and learn how you can actually nail this search and how to land your first job. All right. And we also share this career transition roadmap, right? So just a reminder, closer to the end of the event. So if you want to get that roadmap, stick around. All right, Lacey, so let's start from the beginning. What were you doing like before you even decided to transition into UX?
That's a really good question. I kind of bounced around. So when I graduated college and I had a bachelor's in film and a master's in sociology, and I was like, what am I going to do with this? And I ended up going into learning experience design, like e-learning and things like that, similar to UX design, but not the same type of thoughtfulness of UX design where you really think about your users, at least not at the company I worked for. It was more like quick, like put together some learning materials, let's get it out. So you know, and I really loved it at first, and then after a few years I was like, you know what, like I don't feel like I'm being challenged enough. I feel like I could offer more value. I feel like there's more that I could do for digital experiences. And I had been thinking about UX for a very long time. Um, before I even finally pursued it, I'd been considering it back and forth. And then the pandemic happened. And the program that I started, which is Michael's program, was originally in person in New York. And I had seen it before the pandemic. And I was like, wow, this sounds like what I would want to do. But you know what? Let me look into these other schools that are local. And then the pandemic happened, and I was like, oh, what do I do? You know, like, I don't think that I can go to this other school now because I was going to go part time. But now, because of like the job market was up in the air, I was like, I need to stay full time. So then I found that this was now virtual because of the pandemic. So I went and did that. But yeah, now I'm getting off topic. But yeah, before I did it, I was sociology, film, and learning experience design mainly before I transitioned into UX.
Awesome, awesome. What were some of your, we'll basically take a step back and basically ask you like overall journey questions a little bit, and then we'll kind of go phase by phase of this journey and basically dig into more detail. What were some of your biggest challenges in the beginning, like maybe when you were just starting out?
Oh, definitely. I would say just the learning curve to start out. You know, it's so overwhelming. Like there's just so much to learn about the field, and like if you just do a Google search, you're just gonna get millions of results. So it was difficult to figure out where to start. And then I would say another challenge that I had was maybe confidence of feeling like, is this right for me? Can I really do this? Can I make a difference? I think was also a really big challenge. And then, yeah, and then just making myself marketable. You know, like I didn't have really any online presence at that point. I didn't have my own website or anything like that. So it was like, starting from square one, I was like, okay, like I need to do all of these huge things, but I haven't even taken the first step yet. So it would feel a little bit overwhelming. Oh, sorry. Let me point the camera. I don't know why.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, don't worry.
I don't know why.
I sent Lacey a note. Could you point the camera down a little
Let me
so we
try
can see
my
you
best.
better?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it works
Yeah,
perfect on Google Meet, but I don't know on Zoom it had a weird
yeah, no
angle. Okay, there
worries,
we
no
go. I
worries.
think that's a little bit better.
All right, so that's cool. So let's also kind of take a quick step back, right? And basically start again with a slightly bigger picture or like end in mind, so to speak. To make your job search effective, right? Because I mean, the event is obviously about landing that first job, right? But that takes a lot of effort and a lot of practice and a lot of basically doing a lot of things before you actually get to that goal, right? So that's where we're going to start, like all these different competencies and things you need to do to actually become a candidate employers will really want, and then also dive into how to get through that job search more effectively. So in your opinion, to make the job search more effective, right, it makes sense to first find out, again, what employers are really looking for and in UX candidates, and then make yourself that attractive, turn that yourself into that attractive candidate. So in your opinion, at a high level, what do you think are the top 3 to 5 most important things that define that attractive candidate?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think the number one most important thing is to show that you are a problem solver. I think a mistake that I often see is that people will create case studies that are like very cookie cutter, like everything just went according to plan. But I think it's really important to show, like, hey, this problem came up and this is how I solved it. And really like cover all of those messy details and things like that. Another thing I think is like finding your brand. Like when I first started, I applied to like all different kinds of jobs, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I feel like if you really want to stand out, you really need to figure out like what industry do I want to focus on. Okay, so I want to focus on maybe like these 1 to 3 industries. Okay, so what do these industries really value in a candidate? What kind of previous knowledge do they really want someone to know? And it's not just, even though it's a UX position, it's not necessarily we just want you to have a UX background. So like, for example, if you're applying to ed tech, having maybe a teaching background would be hugely beneficial. Like that's something, like if you're a teacher and you're transferring into UX, like that's not something you should discount. That could actually make you stand out in certain industries. And it's like the same with other industries like healthcare. Like if you've worked as a nurse, that's a huge, like you can really empathize in the right mindset, even though that's not directly related to UX. The industry is related to it. um, so I think having that type of branding and that type of specialization can really make you stand out. And I think also just like anything that can make you seem like you're going to add something new to the team. So like I in my experience anyway, I'm sure you'll get different answers from different people, but in my experience, like when they're trying to add to a UX team, they don't want a carbon copy of someone who's already on the team. They want someone who's going to bring a different background or a different perspective, like someone who has a different specific area of expertise or experience or something like that. Like they don't want someone that's just going to say the same things that other people on their team are going to say. They want someone that's going to challenge the team. So I think that's another thing to really try and highlight in your job search to make you really stand out against other candidates.
All right, awesome. So in your opinion, right, if we kind of start digging into a bit more detail, right, let's talk briefly about hard skills. This is usually not what most people find the most challenging based on our research, right, and based on, so we'll just spend one question on that only, right? So in your opinion, what are the most important hard skills, hard UX skills that employers look for in UX candidates?
So it depends on what type of UX position you have. So if you're a UX designer, I would say design collaboration tools like Figma for sure. They're going to be looking for you to have experience with that and know how to do that. If you're more UX research, they're going to be looking for maybe you've used research tools like usertesting.com or really any other research tool where you've conducted interviews or use these tools to conduct thematic analysis, anything like that. I think so. Tools, I think, would be a really good hard skill. And then if you really want to have an extra edge, knowing just the basics of HTML, CSS, those types of things can be helpful. Obviously, you don't need to be an expert, but like just having just a base level knowledge is a good skill to have to really help you just be able to make sure that your experiences are functional and be able to talk to developers and understand, like what they're trying to say as well.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely agree on that, right? Because often it's not even about knowing some coding skills, right? To code yourself, even though, I mean, there are some roles that might ask you to do that. It's mostly to be able to communicate with developers, so you're not kind of designing this like pie in the sky type of solution, and get more respect from developers too. And in addition to that, right, it's basically just understanding the UX process, right? So it's in different phases, right? For those of you like maybe even earlier on in this journey, right? Essentially, you just need to understand the process, understand the key phases, understand the key deliverables. And if you're just starting out, right? If you're just starting out to learn, start with that big picture, right? And that's what I see like the biggest problem with like a lot of colleges and like educational programs, et cetera, is just this just in case learning, right? Where you study a lot of stuff just in case you might need it someday somewhere, right? Instead of really focusing. And that's why it can take you to do something 5 years instead of 6 months, right? Is because you often not start with experience of project-based learning with specific goals, objectives, and deliverables, and pick up exactly what's important for effective for UX candidates, specifically for UX professionals. So Lacey, how about soft skills, right? What do you think are the top soft skills hiring managers look for, maybe in more junior candidates, and how can one gain or build those?
Yeah, I think soft skills are really what sets apart junior candidates. So, like, anyone can learn a tool, and of course that takes effort and time. I'm not trying to belittle that at all, but it can be more difficult to have the right soft skills. So, employers don't want to hire someone that they think isn't going to be a good culture fit. I mean, I don't want to sweepingly say that about all employers, but in my experience, they want you to be a good culture fit. So I think one soft skill is just really like being able to get along with your team, but more focused on the actual work. I think being able to communicate effectively your ideas and thoughts. So, like, this isn't going to be something that won't take effort. Sometimes you really just need to practice your communication and thoughts, like practice the way you write or practice the way you talk. Like, if you're about to go into a meeting, plan out what you're going to say and make sure that it's meaningful, because no one really wants their time to be wasted. And make sure, like, you're understanding the person that you're talking to, what they want and how you can give it to them. So if you're talking, this is going to be different versus if you're talking to a developer versus if you're talking to another designer, or if you're talking to your manager. Make sure to keep things as relevant to them as possible and communicate effectively. I think also being able to find compromises, because you'll have to do that a lot. Like, you'll think that this one thing is exactly what needs to happen, and maybe that's true, but you can't force it because you're not a team of one, you're a team of many people. So being able to communicate why you think that, and then if it's not going to work, finding ways to compromise and still make it the best experience that it could be, I think is huge. And yeah, I think communication is probably the number one. And problem solving, I mentioned that earlier. Being able to think critically, and it's one thing to be able to go and make a design, but in my opinion, it's more difficult to think about the strategy behind that design and why you're designing like the way that you're designing, and why you're organizing content the way that you're organizing it. I feel like that's the really difficult part of just being able to figure out, like, what's the problem and how can I effectively solve that.
Yeah, that's what. So we had Jared Spool on last week, actually, and what he said was, we don't call soft skills soft because they're hard. So
Yeah.
this is a good way to describe it, right? It's because I don't know why they're called soft, honestly, but they're often like much more difficult than some of the hard skills. Yeah, we've also seen is just team collaboration in the UX setting is huge, right? So that's what I tell during all these consultations when we have the discussions, right? Because we analyze like hundreds of those job descriptions, talk to so many employers. It's just team. You must be able to demonstrate that doing that in the UX setting. And it's not just having the skill, right? And you must be able to prove and demonstrate that you have actually done it, right? Also, as Jared said, by having those stories and experiences that you can kind of showcase your resume and your portfolio. And then, of course, is presentation, because you'll be doing a lot of presenting. And client interaction, right? Because that's very different. That's basically the reason, one of the reasons we have real client projects in our program, for example, right? Is because it's a completely different experience, right? Versus when you are sitting there solo designing something, right? In a vacuum, which it's a great starting point. Like, it's a great way to learn the fundamentals. I feel it's probably the best way to learn initially, right? Maybe doing that first project. But then after that, it's a very different experience, right? So you want to have that team collaboration experience and client interaction, stakeholder management. Like, those softer skills are absolutely crucial and what will actually set you apart, because that's what most employers really look for.
Yeah, and I will say too, I think like personally, I've witnessed the biggest mistake of any of my colleagues is just not being able to get along with their team. They, like they're setting themselves up for failure. I've seen it multiple times happen where someone's just cannot, try and compromise and get along with their team and listen to what they have to say, and it won't get you anywhere. I mean, maybe it will in the short term, but not in the long term.
Yeah, yeah. So basically that my way or the highway approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's yeah, definitely a very important skill too, and it's you usually develop it through practice, right? So it's hard to, I mean, you can read about it, but until you actually experience it and practice and run into these situations, and learn something, that's how you really build that type of experience. And I already see some questions coming in Q&A. So Chelsea, thank you for adding your question. For others, feel free, don't be shy. Again, no question is stupid. As long as it's focused on the UX career transition, landing your first UX job, please use Q&A tab, put your questions there, upvote others, review others' questions. Yeah, we'd love to. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then we'll also take a few questions or so from Q&A as well. So once again, make it as interactive as possible. And thanks to those who introduced themselves in the chat. And by the way, there's an interesting feature on Zoom, right? So make sure you use that everyone chat, right? Because by default, sometimes it only goes to host and panelists. So if you want to introduce yourself, not just to host and panelists, you want to make sure that little blue drop down actually says everyone. All right. So next, Lacey, what I want to ask you, how do I break into UX without professional design experience?
Oh yeah, that's the uphill battle. Because you do need experience, you do. And I would say you just have to, okay, there's a few things you can do. You can like work off of your past experience and try and show how you you solved a problem with like a specific solution. Like that's always valuable, and that's huge in UX. Like in your portfolio, that's something that you can leverage. Like for example, I worked in learning experience design, so I was able to leverage some of those things. Even though it didn't directly correlate, I was able to say like, okay, this was a problem that we had and this is how we solved it. Same thing with many other industries. But if you find that that's not working or it doesn't make sense with your past experience, I would say another thing that you can do that I highly recommend is just kind of biting the bullet and, just doing volunteer work. Or if you can find one internship, that would be great. Like sometimes you just have to really like, even though I know it's not anything anyone would prefer to do, doing work and not getting paid for it. But in the long run, it can really, really benefit you. And like I don't want to make it sound too much like a business, but it's really like you'll get a return on your investment if you have those those like real life experience. Even if you were working for free, they don't need to know that. You don't need to put that in your case study. All you need to say is I worked on the UX for this project. And having a real project too, I mean, you can do school projects and those are also valuable. I don't want to discount those at all. But I would say when you're working for a real client and you're having real projects, things come up that you wouldn't even really consider in a school project, like different like functionality, like time. Time is a big one, like anything's possible with infinite time, but there's always going to be a deadline. So how do you still solve this problem with the limitations that you have? What are your constraints? What are the business needs? Like there's just something that can't replace working on like a real life project versus like a simulated project in school, which again is still valuable. Like that's definitely something you should include in your portfolio. But if you could have at least one volunteer or internship type of project in there as well, I think it would really go a long way.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Lacey. Yeah, it's definitely a huge point. We're going to dive into this in a bit more detail in terms of case studies, real experience, why it's important, especially now in this market, right? Because right now the market is more challenging. So it's even more important to stand out So let's come back to that. I also saw a couple more questions come up in Q&A, and thank you for posting those. Again, keep those coming. That's awesome. Since we talked about communication, Lacey, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any? So Frenchel, and by the way, if I mispronounce anyone's name, sorry about that. Not intentional, obviously. You can somehow correct me in the chat, or at least let me know yes, no. So Frenchel or Frenchel. Let's just go with Frenchel. Do you have any, is asking, do you have any recommendations or books on how to be a better communicator? I often struggle with explaining what I mean effectively.
Yes, there's one called, I believe it's called Articulating Design Decisions. That's a really, really good one for communication. So as far as books goes, I think that would be a good one. But I will say it does not replace practice, even if you're just doing it on your own in the mirror or just at your desk, practicing like what you're going to say, why you're going to say it, and the importance of it. I feel like that, and even going to like your spouse or your relative or your friend and saying like, hey, can you give me feedback? These are the things that I want to communicate. Are you understanding them? Does it make sense to you? Like, how could I communicate this better? And just, even though they're not tied to whatever you're working on, just getting another perspective is also incredibly helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Lacey. And also what comes to mind, I don't remember the exact name of that book. I think it's something about storytelling. But here's what you can do. I do mention we have this long comprehensive training video that you might have seen. Maybe you have not seen it. So I'm going to ask Mika if she could put the link in the chat. It's called, basically, the title is like How to Become Hireable and Land Your First Job, I believe. And in that, I don't remember which section, but I do mention a few books there about networking, about job search. That's not exactly about communication, but we talk about storytelling. We also ran another event specifically about storytelling in your portfolio with someone who basically like really mastered that. And so Mika, if you could, please put once you, if you're able to find it, please put that link in the chat as well, in addition to that training video. I think maybe in that storytelling recording, the guest, I think, maybe mentioned some books as well. But it's basically huge, and you do want to like read a little bit and read, like, don't focus just on reading. Again, that's the big mistake many people make, just focusing on content consumption instead of like, you need to consume some, right? So you have the theory, but then really practice. That's what will get you better, right? Because that's a mistake. There's so much content that you could start right now and you keep watching for the next 20 years probably. And by the end, you would still not be ready to get a UX job, right? Because you haven't actually practiced anything, right? So focus on practice first, right? And then figure out what theory you need to know. And thanks, so Franchelle, for the question. Amazing. I see some additional questions popping in here. Amazing. So keep those coming. I see, right, so we'll come back in a second. So I see Manglin asked the question, and is it Baba Jide? Let me know if I pronounce your name correctly. So thank you for answering the question. Chelsea, Achut, amazing. I see thumbs up. Okay, wow. I guess I was lucky for the first time. All right, thank you. Okay, so let's come back to experience for a second. Any additional ways, like, so that you can think of? You can talk about in general, and you can talk about what you did in the program or outside of the program as well, to any ways that can help you build work experience when most employers are already looking for that, for those candidates with 1 or 2 years of that experience, even for entry-level jobs.
Yeah, something else that you could do is you can just, if you can't get like the real work with a real company, you can, for example, go to a company's website, and let's say you go to, I don't know, Toyota's website, and you say like, you know what, like, I feel like this can be improved. And you can just do a proof of concept. So even though you're not directly hired by Toyota, and like you're not getting paid for this could just be a side project where let's say you're like, like I know these people who drive Toyotas, or who are looking for a new car maybe, or like come up with like the right criteria, and say, hey, can I create a mock script and interview you? And then I can recreate Toyota's website, but then implement the solutions that I would recommend. And it's like a proof of concept of like, even though it's not real, you're still working with a real website, and you still conducted real research, and you still found real solutions. That is another way that you could potentially get some experience and something to help build your portfolio, and it be really hands-on.
Okay, so that's and ideally you want to also get in touch with Toyota and maybe get a stakeholder from there and get them involved, right? Because usually
It's
it's,
possible, yeah.
if you can, maybe fly to Tokyo and try to get in touch. No, of course, I'm just kidding. But yeah, in addition to that, you obviously can do something like that. What you could also do is basically volunteer and find startups or maybe local businesses or etc. I would say ideal project. Let me just basically describe like what an ideal case study would look like, right? Because if ultimately you want to work, let's say in a tech company or in a tech department of a non-tech company, there's like a bigger corporation, right? You want to have something similar, right? So ideally, you want it to be a tech or digital product, something interactive, like an app, or web app, or mobile app, or some type of software, right? So ideally, I mean, it goes like this, right? So hypothetical project is here, right? It's like, okay, a case study, right? Then you have like local business that needs a site or something like this, right? Maybe information display, like more marketing type of site. Better than hypothetical, but still not exactly like the best. What you ideally want to do is find a digital product or a tech product, right? With more flow, more interactivity, right? Where you can actually map those user flows, right? So not just information display, right? But an actual application, right? And it could be a web application too, right? And those usually make the most like interactive, interesting, comprehensive case studies and would position you the best when looking for jobs at similar types of companies, right? Of course, unless you want to just work for a local business and do a website for them, but that's usually not really UX, right? So that's, and a lot of small businesses can't really afford to hire a dedicated full-time UX designer, right? It's like a small local thing. So here's what else I wanted to ask you, Lacey. In terms of portfolios, right? So we're going to kind of go back with some portfolios, case studies, and basically discuss this in a bit more detail. And I also see a couple of questions on portfolios as well, which are very common. What do you think are the top 3 things that make a UX portfolio effective, in your opinion?
I think going straight to the point from the beginning, like I found that yes, you can give detail, but the best thing to do, like right up front, like for case studies specifically, is to put like the problem, solution, and the impact, almost like a summary of what you're about to show them, just in case, because these are the most important things they're going to want to know. And these are the things that you want them to look at. And I see a lot of case studies that will have like, it'll start with the problem, you scroll down, you get to the solution, scroll down, get to the impact, which is fine. But those are really the key things that most recruiters are going to be looking for. Like, how did you help the company? Like, what problem did you solve? How did you help them? And what benefit did the company get from it? So I would recommend doing that. Also, on a portfolio in general, just make sure that your navigation is not confusing. Have it be as simple and as clear as possible. I would highlight if you've worked with other companies in the past, even if it's not UX specific, like if you've worked for a hospital or I don't know, we'll go back to Toyota. If you've worked for Toyota, I would highlight like I've worked with these companies in the past. Another thing too is that if you do work on client projects and you have them in your portfolio, a lot of times you run into the NDA issue. And there's different ways. I think with that, I've typically just used a password protection. That's something that I've struggled with a lot for my portfolio is like I have these great case studies, but there's information here that I can't really share. So I've used password protection, but there's also other things you can do, like if you work on something that's public, that's something that you can make public in your portfolio as well. So those are other things that you can consider, or you can just cross out any of the proprietary information that can't be shared, and so that you can still try to have a public case study in general, because I think having at least one public case study is definitely really helpful. So and then maybe having the other ones password protected, but it really just depends on your situation and you know what you have to work with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, ideally, especially if you're, let's say, volunteering, right, and you pick some type of startup to help or something, you want to negotiate that in advance, right? And that's a mistake that some people make, is that they just kind of jump on it and start doing it. You want to talk to them in advance. You want to discuss what you'll be working on. You want to make sure that it will actually be okay to showcase in your portfolio, right? Of course, especially if you're doing that project with the goal of learning and building yourself up, right? If let's say if it's a full-time job that you just found and you're making lots of money already, right? It's a different story, right? So you're not learning, you're earning basically, right? So that's different situation. And you also want to, when you talk to those folks who, let's say it's a startup or a small business or some nonprofit, et cetera, ideally you want to plan everything out with them in advance, scope out, and you want to ensure that you have people who are really interested in implementing your work, right? So you want to make sure that they have this implementation intent. So it's not just, yeah, just do whatever you want, like we don't care, right? Not that type of attitude, but you want them to actually have skin in the game. You want them to really want your work, right? Ideally, right? Of course, not always possible, but this way it increases the likelihood of implementation, and that way you can also showcase those results and impacts on your portfolio, on your case study, right? Which is important too.
Yeah, and also if you do password protect your work, it's good practice to get permission. Be like, hey, I'm not going to share this publicly, but I'm just putting this on my portfolio. Just as a, don't be like, haha, I'm going to put all this private information and I know I'm not supposed to. You know, it's good. It's good to try and get permission.
Yeah, yeah, definitely talk to them and yeah, ask them what they're okay or not okay with. Some companies are okay with just sanitizing, removing their company information or logos, et cetera, but still having the information available. So it's common. And sometimes you can have an NDA, but which doesn't really preclude you from showcasing the case study in your portfolio. So yeah, that's so I see some more questions popping in. So Achut, I hope you that answered a part of your question, right? So I think you asked, what are the key elements that make an excellent resume and portfolio for a UX professional? So we haven't talked about resumes yet. We'll get to resumes as well in a bit. Actually, well, let me just ask this question now, since that's my actually next question. Then we'll come back to portfolio and case study. Biggest mistakes that you have seen that candidates make first in their portfolio and second in their resume?
I think the biggest mistake, and I touched on it earlier, is not making it too perfect and cookie cutter. As with your case studies in particular, you want to highlight the problems. Like you want to say like, oh, we were planning this, but then the client came back last minute and said that we need to completely change our direction. And then we only had, I don't know, 2 weeks left to do this. So you want to highlight that. You don't want to make it sound like everything went smoothly. You want to say the client did this, we only had 2 weeks, and this is how we tackled that. And knowing, because those are things that happen pretty often, at least in my experience, just unexpected things will come up. A new stakeholder will join a meeting and just have totally different idea of what they want to see. And that's being able to take that in and then finding a solution that works for both you, the client, and the users is so valuable. And it's such a great skill and experience to have. So make sure to really highlight those things. I would also say try to have at least 3 case studies if you can, even if one is maybe not directly UX, but it's still related. Like let's say you were a teacher, it's not directly UX, but you only have 2 UX case studies. You can do a third case study about like, okay, this is how I created a lesson plan to solve this problem or something. Or even if it's not a full case study, it could still be, a little story of like showcasing your problem solving skills and creating something that really helps users, which I guess would be the students, because they're still users, things like that. I'm trying to think. And then also having a focused portfolio as well. Like who are you? Like, are you a generalist? Are you a designer? Are you a researcher? Like having something, don't have it like all over the place. Like have organization, have your branding, and then have your case studies highlight your branding and your specializations as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Lacey. So, and by the way, I should, so we'll actually be coming back to resumes in a bit more detail as well, and LinkedIn also. So I see Chelsea also asked a question here. So let's take that, since it's related to skills specifically, and it kind of touches on hard skills and coding. I believe it's a longer question, and so I want to go over this. I'm a career changer and currently looking for a UX design job. I do see quite a bit of jobs asking for designers to know HTML and JavaScript, I assume. I want to learn, but I'm kind of stump where I should learn and how much of it I should learn, because like you said, it's to help communicate to developers. Speaking of communicating with developers with code, what does that look like? Is it like your code is wrong, or what if we did this code to make the design work? How important is this code still when Figma has a dev feature? So there's like a lot of this, like 5 questions, Chelsea, in one. But let's try to reply to everything.
Okay, so if you see in the job description needing to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, if it's just like the basics, which is typically what you would need to know, you can find online free resources to learn those basics. And I wouldn't just Google and like read articles randomly. I would try to find some sort of structure that starts you from like lesson 1 to lesson 10 or whatever number of lessons, because otherwise you can really get lost in a rabbit hole just trying to Google different things. Like you could maybe check Coursera or Udemy or something like that to learn the basics. If they're asking you to be experts in it, then it sounds like they want you to do 2 different jobs, and I wouldn't recommend applying to that job. I mean, personally, I wouldn't apply. If they're saying you need to be an expert in coding and design, that sounds like they're asking you to do 2 positions. I feel like they need to go back to the drawing board and figure out their funding for 2 positions. Also, when communicating to developers, it's not about telling them if their code is wrong or anything like that. It's more about functionality. Like, for example, you're creating an experience and you want to be able to send out, let's say people are signing up for an event and you want to be able to send email reminders for that event. That's something that just like understanding, I mean, maybe not with HTML and CSS directly, like knowing the basics, maybe you're not going to completely understand how that would functionally work, but those are conversations that would be easier to have. Like, so if the developer is saying, well, it's going to be difficult to do because in the back end, I don't know, like this system's not communicating to that system. So what we can do is we can send them an initial email, but we can't send them the reminders because this functionality is not working. I feel like this has gotten it to kind of a confusing example, but it's more like about the features that you want to include. It helps you understand like how much, like how does this function, like how much effort does this put in. It just, I think the best way to say is it helps you empathize with the developer, so that way you can go in with something that's more likely doable, or if it's not doable, you're more likely to understand where they're coming from. It's not about telling them if they're doing something right or wrong at all. It's only about understanding where they're coming from and really understanding like how things function a little bit better. Like I'm trying to think of a better example than that calendar one, but I don't know, like I need to change the color of this background. If you know HTML and CSS, you understand like, okay, I don't think that's a really big lift. Let me talk to the developers. And if the developers are talking about the CSS, you have an understanding of it. It's not completely foreign to you.
Awesome, awesome. No, that was pretty comprehensive. Thank you, Lacey. That's good. And also, Chelsea, by the way, also just make sure you don't call JavaScript Java, because then it's two different things. Java is the backend language that they use on the backend, similar to like C, I believe, or something like that. Yeah, thank you for the thumbs up, whoever sent that. Yeah, so that's all right. And I see a few more questions here, so keep them coming, about portfolios specifically. And again, we want to make sure we cover all these different competencies and all these different elements of like what makes you a great candidate first, right? Because if you saw like just the title of the events, right, and you thought that, oh, we're just going to talk about searching for jobs, obviously it's not just that, right? Because if you don't do this first part well, basically the product part, build yourself up, then all your search is going to be almost useless, right? You're just going to set yourself up for a bunch of frustration and rejection and nothing else, right? And you might get lucky, but the probability is low. So that's why we're spending so much time on the like how to build yourself up, the experience, the portfolio, the case study, the skills, and all that stuff, right? So you can actually stand out and be a great candidate, especially now, especially in this market, right? So it's gotten even more important. Another question, Lacey, what do you think, like based on your experience, right? You're not a hiring manager, but based on your experience with hiring managers, when they evaluate portfolios, like do they give equal weight to all the case studies?
No. Usually they'll I mean, if you're lucky, they'll look at more than one. But you want to make sure that your best case study is highlighted first, or if you have a case study that just works better based off of this job description, if possible, I would talk to the recruiter and say, like, hey, this is a really great case study related to what you're asking for. Like, if you can highlight this to the hiring manager, please do so. Because I mean, it's very unlikely that they're going to even look at all of your case studies. I mean, if they look at the first one and they're already not very impressed, they're probably not going to look at another one. I think the best way to get them to look at another one is to already get them interested with the first one. So whatever you can do to highlight your best case study, or to like send a link that can potentially be sent to the hiring manager of the case study that's most relevant, that would probably be your best bet. And that's also why you want to put problem solution impact at the beginning of the case study, because you want to grab their attention right away. Because if they're scrolling and halfway through they're not impressed, they're not even going to look at the rest of the case study. They're going to move on to the next candidate.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. So in your case, Lacey, remind me, how many case studies did you have when you landed your first job?
I had 2, but I was really lucky to get my first job with only 2. I'd say 3 is your best bet for sure. But you can do it with 2. You can do it with 2 really good case studies. And I mean, who knows? Maybe you can do it with 1. I haven't heard of it, but anything is possible if it's a good enough case study.
And you had 2, so I know you had at least 1 from the program. Did you have other real ones? Remind me, like what's...
I had 1 from my previous job with learning experience design, so it wasn't directly UX related, and there were a lot of NDAs, so I couldn't like post designs or like say exactly who the client was. I had to keep it very general, but it still in the end benefited me, so I was glad that I included it.
Okay, okay. All right. So, and in your experience, how important is the length or duration of the effort that you put into the project?
Into a project?
Yeah.
Oh, it just depends. I don't know. It really depends on the project. It could be like a really quick project in just a few weeks, or it could be like a year-long project. I mean, it really just depends how big it is, what type of initiative it is, when's the deadline. And sometimes some of these projects are ongoing. Like when I worked at Dell, like I worked on projects ongoing, continuously iterating on like the same type of thing over a long period of time. So it just depends. I mean, you can do a project really quickly, or a project could last a long time. It just it there no project is alike. They're not all created equal.
Yeah, yeah, and just keep. All right, keep talking. I need some coffee.
I need some um
All right.
I don't know. Like to find, and there's no like one right way to do projects either. It's not always like a linear design thinking. Like first you do define, and then you do this, and then you do that, and then you do that, and that's the right way to do it. Like some projects are not like that. Sometimes you start out with like it's already been defined. Like you're just going onto the project and everything's already been defined. There's already a problem statement, and now you're just trying to ideate on like how you can solve this problem, and those are things that you can highlight in your portfolio, like, hey, because that's also a skill, coming in with information already available and being able to get up to speed on that information, and then be able to come up with solutions even though you weren't maybe involved in these parts of the project. Like those are also things that you might want to highlight, and you don't need to make it like this is the order for all of my case studies. You should really customize them to the project and tell the story the most effective way you can.
Yeah, yeah, that's so now I can talk. Actually, that's something.
Yeah.
Just make sure you don't go into the market with like 3 hackathon hack case studies for 3 days each, right? So that's not going to be sufficient for that 3 case study requirement, right? So
Maybe for one of them, but I wouldn't have that as your only
yeah,
thing.
yeah. So based on our experience and research, right, it's important to have like a duration of at least, I mean, it depends on, of course, how intense it is, et cetera, right? And sometimes in some cases, you may be able to do more in a month than someone did in a year, right? Depends how much effort and how intense it was. But just to like generalize it, uh, we recommend having a like duration of at least 6 weeks or so, maybe a little longer, so that your case studies are more sizable and basically bigger, more comprehensive, right? So it's not just like one little thing. Um, Lacey, what types of projects are most effective in one's portfolio based on your experience, and how can you tell hypothetical projects apart from real ones?
I think the ones that are most effective just truly depends on the type. Oh, excuse me. The type of industry you're going into. So if you're, I don't know, applying to a job with Amazon, an e-commerce project is going to be a lot more effective than, I don't know, like an internal portal project, for example. Like you really it one project could be really effective for these jobs that you're applying for, but then this other one is definitely a much more effective for these other jobs that you're applying for. So it just depends, and you want to know the industry that you're applying into, like what their biggest pain points are, what their biggest problems are to solve. Because so like going back to like ed tech, for example, like if you're really trying to market yourself in that industry, you want to make sure you're looking into, okay, like what kind of KPIs do they look for, or like what kind of things are valuable to them, and then highlight those in your case study for that industry. You just want to make sure you're tailoring it's UX with your portfolio. It's UX. You want to empathize with your audience. You want to tailor it to what they're looking for. And your audience could change or be different based off of which jobs you're applying for. So it's a little ambiguous, but there's no one right way to do it. And then I think you asked another second part to that question, but I forget what it was.
Yeah, how can you tell hypothetical projects apart from real ones?
Oh, okay, yeah. I think going back to what I've said multiple times, it being so cookie cutter and perfect it's usually like a huge sign that this is probably a hypothetical project and not a real world project, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to run into some sort of issue, or you're going to have to do backflips to solve something that came up that you weren't expecting, or or a client came in the middle of the project and completely changed the direction. Like, when you see things like that, you can tell like this must be a real project, because this is the kind of stuff that happens in the real world. Whereas hypothetical projects, it tends to not really have those types of things. And then maybe also something that would make it seem hypothetical is if there's not a team that you're working with as well, because in the industry, I'm sure there's startups where there's just one UX person, but that aside, typically you're working with a team, and being able to like showcase those like communication touch points and that collaboration also makes it feel more real versus hypothetical.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's so to just go a little deeper on that, I know we touched on this, and then we'll move on to the next point, or actually take a couple of questions. In your opinion, right? Why do you think it's important to have those real client case studies in your portfolio, and not just hypothetical student projects?
Well, because nothing really replaces real experience. There's nothing that can really, you can get like, I don't know, 90% there without the real experience, but that extra 10% is really significant and really important. And it's just, it's just like for yourself, nothing can replace that experience that you're getting and to help prepare you for the job market. But also from an employer perspective, they're, even for entry level jobs, like they're, even though it does feel and seem unreasonable, they're looking for that type of experience. So if they're seeing hypothetical, a lot of times that will get written off as like, oh, that was a school project. That wasn't real experience. I'm not saying every employer does that, but there are many that will do that, and they want to know that you've actually been in the field and gotten that experience before hiring you.
Yeah, that's makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's because that's what we hear um, from a lot of people all the time, right? Like we ask, what's the biggest roadblock? What's most challenging, right? And by far, it's always about experience. That was kind of what inspired us to start this whole program in the first place, right? Just basically just provide a better way to start a career or to transition into this career, right? So because the traditional way of learning or starting a career seems to be a little broken, right? You just um, learn and learn and learn and learn more and do hypothetical stuff and do conceptual stuff, etc. Then you try to get hired, then what happens? Then nobody wants to hire you, right? Because you don't have, even in high growth fields, right? Because you don't have any of that experience. That was really like, we thought like, why can't we do this better, right? Why can't we actually incorporate that real experience into a learning environment, right? And make this great mix, right? That can actually transition, make it much smoother transition, right? So you can actually avoid that problem.
Yeah, and I would say you can even leverage your network, like your friends and family. Like, oh, okay, so my friend owns this business, or is working on this. Like, maybe I can reach out to them. And then also, like Michael said, small businesses, like, even though like in those cases you're probably going to be working for free or very very little money, it's still real experience. If you're working on, hey, like, even like, hey dad, do you want a website for your construction business or something like that? Like, let's work together. You don't have to say that the client was your dad in your case study. No, that's not a requirement, and that's real experience and something real that you worked on.
Yeah. I mean, the mistake that a lot of people make is just not doing that volunteering, not doing that type of approach, basically. And what can end up happening is, okay, you do like a traditional boot camp that doesn't have any real client stuff, real client projects or case studies, etc. And then you start applying, right? Even though I think like right now, fewer people do that actually. Before it was more common, but right now the market is a little bit more demanding, right? So you have to build yourself up more. And then you can just waste a lot of time, right? So then you can just keep doing that for like a year, not really get anywhere. And then everyone keeps telling you, while someone else spends the next 3 to 6 months or whatever, something like that, doing some pro bono work, volunteering for a startup, interacting with them, maybe getting a couple of great, solid, real kind case studies and experience, and just becoming like a better candidate than you would be, right? And they would get to that goal potentially 6 months faster, right? And make 6 months more of your salary, right? And be less frustrated and much less rejected, right? So it's just usually a much better approach to just keep building yourself up. And it doesn't matter how you do it, right? You could volunteer, you could use organizations like, that's what I remember, like Democracy Lab or Catch a Fire or something like that. If you want to do something like that on your own, right? Totally fine too, right? That's, I feel like that's much better approach than just applying without any of that type of experience. So, I see that, so Alina had another question here. It's about portfolios and about experience. So she was asking, how much of the previous experience before UX would you put in the about section or mention during the interview?
That's a good question, and it just depends how you can spin it, honestly. Like if it's something that you can spin to be relevant to the question that they're asking and that highlights a really good skill that's good to have in UX, like problem solving, I would definitely talk about it. And I think you would have to do it on a case by case basis of like, what question are they asking me? And will this response about this previous experience be valuable to them? Again, like no, like before you go into an interview, you want to, you want to research the company. You want to try and look up whoever is going to be interviewing you on LinkedIn and try and get to know more about them. And even if possible, try and reach out to people who work for that company and see if they'll give you any advice. I mean, you'll get like probably a lot of people ignoring you, but sometimes you do really get someone who wants to help you out even though they don't know you, and they can give you like really invaluable information about what's valued most in the company. Or you could even ask, if you were working with a recruiter, you can even ask them like, hey, can you give me some tips for this interview? And you can prepare beforehand knowing like, okay, this is what the interviewer is going to value. You can prepare beforehand and say like, okay, well, in my previous position as a nurse, I did X, Y, and Z, and that totally relates to what this interviewer might value, like, so don't go off topic. Like you want to make sure you're directly answering their questions, and you don't want to only talk about your non-UX experience. You definitely want to relate things back to UX, but if you can bring in some of those skills like research, problem solving, communication, like any of those things that are prevalent in many, many industries, that's going to set you apart as well. And that's real life work experience too.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Lacey. What do you think were some of the biggest things that prevented you from, or maybe in general, prevent newer, more junior candidates from getting hired initially, or made you, or hypothetically makes others less attractive to employers?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think maybe, like, I think networking, I mean, lack of networking, I think, really slowed down my search before. And that's not necessarily what didn't make me attractive to employers. I think honestly, like not understanding the breadth of experience and marketing yourself could really hurt you. So, and also not being focused. Like in one of my job searches, I applied to a UX designer and a UX research role, and then after my resume was sent to the hiring manager, they came back and said, "Oh no, we're going to move forward with other candidates." And I asked the recruiter, "Oh, how come, they decided to go with somebody else?" And she was like, "Well, they couldn't really tell like where you stood. Are you a designer? Are you a researcher? Like what are you?" Like, so I think that was one mistake I made early in, where it's, like it's two different roles. And I, like, instead of just deciding on one and marketing myself that way for that one role, I tried to go for both of them. That's just my own personal experience. And it turned out to be the same hiring manager for both roles. So then he saw I applied to both and he was very confused. Something else that might be unattractive is again just too generic. You want your personality to shine through so that you really stand out. You don't want it to be generic. You don't want it to be cookie cutter perfect. Like, you don't want it to look like ChatGPT just like wrote something up for you. You really want, like, not to say you can't use ChatGPT to help you out, but make sure that like, you're really, like, your personality and your brand is really coming through. Otherwise you might be forgettable. Like, you really, like, want them to remember you. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Also, be aware of so, like, a lot of recruiters use systems that just look for keywords, and you could be the most qualified candidate, but if you don't have these specific keywords on your resume, they're not even going to look at it, even though, like, you would be exactly what they're looking for. You just didn't phrase it the way that they wanted. So that's another thing to be conscious of. Like, you can find a lot of those keywords in the job description. So if they're saying X, Y, and Z, like, you might want to have like 5 different resumes tailored to different things. So that way you can make sure, like, I just want these keywords to be hit so that they at least see my resume. So that way, even I know I'm qualified, but I need them to know that I'm qualified. So that's the other thing. So don't just like create your resume and be like, I'm done forever. Like, you might really need to like look at these job descriptions, find out what they're looking at, and then create a custom resume tailored to this specific thing.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very good. Very comprehensive answer. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lacey.
You're
So
welcome.
I see that I wanted to briefly take again Frenchel. I'll go with Frenchel. Let me know in the chat if that's correct. A follow-up question that you have on Lacey's suggestion for a website for a dad's business. So when you talk about doing real experiences that are volunteer-based, like the example you just gave of asking your dad if they want a website, is that a situation where we would do the research and do high fidelity of the website and then literally build a website? I don't have any experience in coding or building websites.
Okay, so I have 2 answers to this. The first answer is no, you don't need to code and build the website. Like, it's more like creating the designs and just explaining how it would solve the problem. But my second answer to this is there are a lot of awesome tools you can use to build a website without using coding. Like, I don't know, Squarespace or Wix, which is not ideal, but you're not applying to a job to be a coder. So you don't need to showcase your amazing coder skills. You can utilize some of these things if you did actually want to build the website and have it be live and show, like, hey, that they really implemented my designs. You can, you can do things like that. Like, you really need to put in the work for like the design thinking, the strategy, the research, the high fidelity designs. But then beyond that, you don't need to like be an expert at coding. You use the tools that you have available to you, and be aware of the tools that you're going to use when you're creating the design as well, to make sure that the design that you're creating is going to translate over to these tools.
Awesome. Yeah, it may make sense. And Franchel, thank you for clarifying how to spell your name. Now I got it. All right. Yeah, and what I would also add to that, right, is it also would be a great idea to just find a startup or find some company, some tech company products, like a small company, it's okay, right? Talk to some accelerators, incubators, startups, etc., that already has some type of team, right? And that way, you may not just get you will focus on the UX work, right? And you may get some developer collaboration experience as well, right? And they may actually implement the work too, right? Without you having to figure out how to code it or how to get someone else to code it. right? So it's that's like another great option, and it will be a tech product for us. So I would focus primarily on tech and digital products. Again, it's not easy, right? It's can sometimes be hard, and it's like requires like you know, being really brave to like and basically be ready to face a lot of rejection, reaching out to these companies. Even if you offer your services for free, a lot of them are not going to buy in because they don't know you. They might, you know, they still have to invest a lot of time in you, right? Or collaborate, and basically you're not proven yet. So it's not easy, right? But if you do it, and if you do it many times, you'll succeed eventually, right? And then of course it's not easy to actually make it through that project, right? Because that's why we advise always having some type of mentor, right? So somebody who is experienced and knows what they're doing, right? Because if the startup is new, right? Let's say they just starting out and they don't have UX background and you're new. And if you put, you know, two of you together, it's not going to be a very great experience, most likely, right? Because you'll just basically can waste a lot of time, right? And it can take like 3 times longer or 5 times longer and might not even get anywhere at all. So important to have some type of mentor, ideally, right? And ideally a team as well. But yeah, so hopefully it clarifies your question. Even if you don't code the website, if you just do the website, I mean, you can still showcase the work, right? You can still do all of the UX work, UX process, right? So it's not as great as if it's not implemented, but you know, still good enough.
Mhm. And you can even put in your case study, like as a constraint, like there wasn't a developer available to our team, but this is how we solved that problem. Like that's a real world problem that you can put in a case study. It shows that this is, you know, like this came up and that seemed like it was gonna be the end of the project, but then we figured it out. You know, we solved the problem.
Yeah, yeah. And if you do something like that, it also shows your key soft skill of leadership and initiative, right? Of taking action and like doing something to make things happen, right? And not just sitting and waiting until something happens for you, right? So it's very important, right? It really shows, and it's hard to find people that have a lot of these, you know, great skills, right? So if you want to stand out, that's like a great way to do it too, and you can demonstrate that through volunteering, through pro bono work, through like taking action, taking initiative, and basically doing all that. And also taking initiative to maybe find a team, right? Like say you want a volunteer project, you're at this event, feel free to write in the chat if you're looking for a team, right? So, and again, we want these events to be as interactive, as valuable for you as possible, as in real life as possible. So again, if you want to share like your LinkedIn or whatever, just get in touch with others or find someone. We're always welcome you to do that. And I see Menglin also asked, are research skills an advantage in job searching? So Menglin, I would also kind of want to clarify if you're referring to just general research skills or specifically UX research skills and what type of job searching, but let's assume that you mean UX research and just regular UX job searching. So what are your thoughts on that, Lacey?
Wait, is it is it just research for looking for a job or UX
Yeah,
research?
the question says, are research skills an advantage in job searching?
I think so, yeah, but I don't think it's like you need this like very refined like study of research skills. Like I think it's something that anybody could either do or learn how to do, just like looking into the industries, looking into if you're applying to a specific job, like looking into like, okay, what does this company value? You know, if it's a big corporation, looking into, okay, what team is this for? How which resume would be the best? Should I tweak my resume a little bit? How can I tweak my resume? How can I optimize my resume to show up in like recruiter systems that just automate like which resumes the recruiter sees? Like that's something that would be really good to look into, of like, because that can also be a blocker. You need to make sure your resume is actually coming up. Different things like that, or like, oh, let me go on LinkedIn and find the hiring manager and send them a message. I mean, chances are they might not respond, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they really like that you took that type of initiative and it sets you apart. Like if it's something that you really want and you think you have all of those qualifications, like putting in that extra effort of like finding the hiring manager, emailing them, or messaging them on LinkedIn, or optimizing your resume to be super tailored towards that, I think is always a really big benefit.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And also, Meglin, just to clarify, I think based on my understanding, right? So, well, first of all, research skills are definitely the crucial part of UX skill set, right? So that's like one of those core skills. So that's one, right?
Yeah,
And
like for UX research, you should have, yeah, at least some UX research skills. Like, but that could be as simple as like I found data from a Google search. I mean, don't say it like this, make it sound better, but like finding data from a Google search and using that data to inform projects, and that's something that anyone can do for a project.
yeah, yeah, and I'm also referring to like the research phases of the product, like discovery research, doing your user interviews, doing your usability tests, right? I mean, that's the key part of the whole UX profession, right? So it's especially like in any classic UX role, that's going to be huge, or of course, definitely in UX researcher role, I would assume. Yeah, and it's basically, yeah, I mean, that's crucial, right? So it's, yeah, so I think that's, hopefully that answers your question. Feel free to clarify if we misunderstood your question. Also, I want to ask if anyone has at this point. So I do have a few more questions, right? For Lacey, we will be wrapping up after that. If at this point, so you've listened, you're like, oh, I had this crucial question and I hope to learn something and I haven't learned it yet, right? So I have this burning question that is not addressed. How can I land this job, right? So please post it in the chat. Please, I mean, not in chat, in Q&A, right? To make sure we will cover it and we'll answer it. And so make sure you do that. So like I said, I wanted to talk about briefly about job search methods, right? So let's talk about your case specifically at first. Like, how did you actually search for jobs and what was most effective? And yeah, let's start with that.
I've had a lot of luck with LinkedIn. At this point, it's probably the only platform I would use, but there's definitely a lot of other really good platforms. But the reason why I like LinkedIn a lot is because sometimes it actually will show the profile of like either the recruiter or the hiring manager, so it makes it really easy to reach out to them directly after you've applied to something. So it just saves time, and then you're definitely reaching out to the right person. I also feel like LinkedIn has a lot of like jobs that are more like real active jobs. I find like other websites, like Glassdoor specifically, I've noticed will have like jobs that's like 6 months old. That's not even like a real job anymore. And the last thing you want to do is apply to a job that is going into a black hole and it doesn't exist, or they've already filled that position and that job posting really shouldn't be there anymore. LinkedIn, I feel like, is really good about like telling you when it was posted, and it feels more legit to me. But there's lots of other job sites as well. Like I know there's Indeed. Something else that I did actually, the way that I got my position at Dell is I actually went to different staffing agency websites, and I just like one off applied to a job on a staffing agency website just because I had run out of jobs that I found on LinkedIn. And so I was like, all right, let me see what else. Let me check these websites, see what I can find. And I just happened to find one and I applied to it, and I got really lucky. It ended up working out. But that's another thing too. Like maybe they have jobs posted there that aren't as publicly posted, so it won't be as much competition. Although a lot of them do post on job boards, but maybe not always. So it's another thing to consider that a lot of people don't think about when applying to jobs. Usually they'll go straight to the job boards. Yeah, I don't know. And yeah, LinkedIn is really, and they have I would recommend getting the free trial for the paid version of LinkedIn, because they tell you which jobs you're a top candidate in, and they'll tell you what skills jobs are looking for so that you can either learn those skills, or if you already have those skills, you can make sure to add it to your LinkedIn profile so that you like go above the others when applying, because you have those skills listed. And they give you all different types of insights to help you be a more attractive candidate, which I really appreciate.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. So in your case, basically, you use mostly LinkedIn, right? And so you're kind of more of an exception, I guess, because lots of people are saying just really emphasize networking, making connections, warm connections, referrals. Maybe recruiters find you, but that usually happens once you have more experience later, right? So in your
No,
case,
networking is important. Yeah, I guess I was thinking about it too digitally, but I actually got my current job through networking. So networking is definitely huge as well. Like aside from like applying for applications, you really should like reach out to people in your network, and then also try and make new connections and add more people to your network that could potentially help you out down the road.
so basically your second job, so your current job, you found through networking.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But the first one was through LinkedIn.
Well, the first one was through, I guess, yeah, the first one was through a staffing agency website, but there were other jobs that I got offers for that I found through LinkedIn, but I didn't accept them.
Awesome, right? So back in those pandemic, most intense pandemic hiring days, right? When you had a luxury of getting multiple offers and not accepting them when just transitioning, right?
It was a beautiful time.
But things are, yes, it's much more challenging now, but it's I like how Jared Spool talked about it last time, also how Jacob Nielsen, we didn't have him on the show. I hope to have him at some point, maybe. But you were saying kind of looking at the longer term perspective, and basically just looking at like overall UX field is growing, right? And demand for UX jobs is growing. But basically what happened is, I know a lot of people have this question usually, and why we're in this more challenging market right now, is basically the companies really overhired because there was this huge spike in digitization of everything when the pandemic basically started taking place. And now basically the correction is taking place, right? So it's, and it looks like, based on my research at least, looks like this year is looking already much better than the last year. Again, not official data or anything, right? Just some personal research. So it starts like, and my LinkedIn looks much better than it looked last year, right? So I see many more people. I got hired here. We're hiring. Like last year was just like, it was just like layoff. So yeah, basically look at it as at like longer term perspective. So don't think it's like going to be like really, really difficult forever, right? So it is more difficult right now, but I would expect this. It's like an overall trend of increasing demand, right? And then there's this extra bump, right? And now we're in this tiny slump, but the overall trend is on the increase, right? So
Yeah, and the best advice I could give, because I do also believe that a part of the reason why there were a lot of layoffs is like the resurgent, not resurgence, but like the up and coming of AI. And some companies are like, well, you know what? We can be more lean now that we have AI to help speed up processes. And I think the right mindset to have around that is not that, oh my God, AI is taking our jobs, like there's nothing I can do. Instead, I think being able to leverage AI would really set you apart. Like going into the future, people are gonna look, their AI is not going to be replacing jobs, but people who know how to use AI are going to be taking people's jobs, like, because that's going to be so important. Like, people are still going to be important, but you need to like continue to like upskill with the trends and with the market. Like, AI is big. Like, you need to learn it. You need to know like how to use it and stay up to date, or else you're going to totally be falling behind. And same thing with emerging technologies. You want to, like make sure that you're like, okay, what's like what's the big thing going on now? Like, what's like, a skill. Like, so for example, I work for AR VR company. That's a major emerging technology that's blowing up like crazy. There's tons of demand for it, and not a lot of people have those types of skills. So like being able to like work with emerging technologies and work with AI is going to make you a lot more marketable.
Yeah, definitely. And and I've read that's what Jacob Nielsen basically writes in his post as well about AI. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. Like amazing stuff, especially if you have any concerns about AI. Like I really love his like outlook overall in terms of like what you're saying, Lacey, right? So basically, in terms of people who know AI tools will be replacing you, not AI itself, right? Because
Exactly.
overall, yeah, it's basically important. That's why we're also implementing AI stuff in our program now. So you basically are, encouraged to use all these different tools during different phases. Essentially, the whole outlook is that it's just going to make you much more productive, right? So there's going to be, if you've studied economics, maybe at some point, right? So you know that with all these technological revolutions, right, or innovations, essentially the output will be greater and the standard of living is likely to be greater because of that, right? So, and the prices might drop, right? But what it means for UX is there will be a lot more UX work being done. Not same amount of work done by 8 people instead of 10, but much more work being done by many more people. And the unit of that, the pricing might go down, but one person will be much more productive, right? And many more companies will be able to actually afford it. So the key point is that his outlook is good. So,
Yeah, and honestly, working with AI is great because you get to focus more on high level tasks instead of like the little like tedious things. And if you do work with AI, you'll quickly realize that it is not a replacement for humans, like not even close. It is more of like a productivity tool to help humans. It's not a replacement.
awesome. So I see that Olivia also asked, after I emphasized if there were burning questions that you still have. So Olivia asked, isn't it important to be good at graphic design skill as well? It's a good question. I actually wanted to add to that as well. And so sometimes we ask this question during our virtual interviews as well, in terms of basically having how important having those UI skills, right? So, but in your opinion, how important is it to be good at like graphic design, visual design, maybe UI side of things as well?
Again, it depends like where you lean. Like if you are more interested in a visual design role, then yes, very important. But if you're more of a research role, not as important. But I think no matter what UX role you go into, you should at least know like the basics of graphic design is good. But I would also, excuse me, I would also look into, like the basics of UX design because it is a little bit different where graphic design is focused more only on the visuals, where UX design is focused on how this design can help users, not how pretty it can be. So just understanding like I don't know, like the foundations of visual design and like what is good design versus what's bad design. I mean, no, for any UX role that should be understood, but in terms of like where you're at with it, like how much you need to know and how much of an expert would just depend on the type of role you're looking for.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. And also to add to that, Olivia, so in the beginning, right, when you're just starting out, it's crucial basically to have some practice, some experience with all phases of the UX process, usually, unless you're really determined to do just research and focus just on research. Even in that case, I mean, you don't really have to have like great visual design skills in that sense, but it's useful to pick up some of the design phases, meaning like the ability to do like some wireframe and prototyping, because you'll have many more opportunities available to you, right? So for example, smaller companies that cannot hire multiple people in UX, right? But they do want to do more research and focus more on research. Maybe they have a visual designer, right? Just a visual UI designer. And they want someone who can actually do the research, maybe do some prototyping, do some low fidelity prototyping, do build tests, iterate, create some wireframes, right? That's why. So it's not exactly visual design, not UI design, but that's why we encourage everyone to get more practice, even if they look for research roles, with some of the design phases too.
And to add to that too, even if you are looking for just a research role, you should know at least the basics of Figma because it's a major collaboration tool for like the entire UX team. So even if you're focusing more on the research, it's very likely that you're going to also be working in these collaboration tools where visual design is being done and collaborating with your teammates there. And so it's important to make sure that you're not breaking everything when you're going in there. You have to have some understanding of how these tools work.
Awesome. And I see so Baba Jide asked the portfolio question, which I mentioned earlier. So I think by now we probably answered already, right? Because we talked quite a bit about case studies, portfolio, about so Babajita, let us know in the chat if that has been covered. Basically, the question is about how to make your portfolio stand out. Like, what's the most important thing that make you stand out on a portfolio? Lacey, if you want to add anything to that in addition to what we covered, let me know.
Yeah, I think don't discount personality. Like, treat your portfolio like a UX project. Like, you wanna treat it like something that's gonna sell you. You know, like you have to. I mean, you can't really use your portfolio as a case study, but it would be very good practice to treat it like that, and really think about like what's gonna stand out. What is this navigation like? What colors am I using? You don't want to use like 10 different colors. You want to like really think about like what your brand is, what your colors are going to be, what your logo is going to be, or, you know, like what's going to stick in somebody's mind. Like you almost like you're a product. Like, how do I market myself as a product?
Exactly. And I see that Alina has another question, and that's related to a question I wanted to kind of go a little deeper on as well about resume and LinkedIn, right? So Alina is asking, how did you improve your LinkedIn profile while searching for your first UX job? And also, Lacey, to add to that, any additional tips you want to give on resumes too?
Yeah. Well, like for LinkedIn in particular, if you have anybody who's willing to endorse your skills or give you a review, that's definitely really nice to have. And then you can give it to them back, you know, so it could be like a give and take kind of thing. But yeah, in general, I feel like LinkedIn is a little bit different from resume, where LinkedIn, I put like everything in the kitchen sink on there, you know, whereas on LinkedIn, I can maybe like list 10 skills underneath the job, whereas like on a resume, there's no way I'm gonna make it that long. You know, I'm gonna keep it to 1 to 2 pages, maybe put like 4 to 5 bullet points underneath my resume. I feel like the resume needs to be as concise and as focused as possible. And this is also my opinion. Maybe somebody else will think differently. But on my LinkedIn, I put everything, like anything that if I have 5 different versions of my resume, I have all aspects of all of those versions on my LinkedIn. I don't know if that's the best way, but that's what I've seen other people do, and it seems like that's the best chance of getting all of those like keywords and those skills in when you're applying to jobs on LinkedIn. Whereas your resume, you might want to just like tailor it more to like the industry that you're applying to, or you know, the specific job that you're applying to, and keep it as concise as possible while still showcasing the value that you would bring to that company.
Exactly. Yeah, it's yeah, LinkedIn is hard, right? Because it's like with resume, you can tell you have many versions of your resume, right? Tailored to different job types or specific jobs, right? With LinkedIn, it's like there's just one LinkedIn. I don't know. I was just saying maybe in the future LinkedIn will allow you to create like multiple LinkedIns or something. I doubt it, but you know, we'll see. Also wanted to mention before I forget about, since some people asked about, or we talked about networking and job search, a few books. Maybe Mika, if you could please type those into the chat. The book that I mentioned all the time, right? And we're still not yet affiliated, called 2-Hour Job Search by Steve Dalton. A really great book about basically how to search for jobs, mainly through networking and informational interviews. Really great how to process, clear, short, 170 pages only. That's it. And it's not going to take you 2 hours, right? Obviously, the entire job search, I wish. But the system, the initial setup of your searching system will take about 2 hours, right? So great book. Never Eat Alone, another great book. By Keith Ferrazzi about networking, similar to Give and Take by Adam Grant. And there was something else, which I don't remember. But essentially, yeah, I was just like interacting with someone on LinkedIn today and basically received a message just asking like, oh, I have this, I graduated, I need a job or something like that. right? And this is like the common mistake that a lot of people make. They basically just like reach out to people and ask them for jobs right away, right? Which is not how you really network, right? It's not going to be very effective, right? Basically, because it's like, almost like meeting someone on the street and asking them to marry you, it's like you need to build the relationship first, right? So you want to meet them, right? You want to build a relationship, maybe it clicks, right? And then maybe they can help you, you can help them, etc. So it's very kind of works that way much better, right? Whereas if you just, because lots of people are doing that outreach, and someone who's like a senior UX manager or some company is just, I'm sure, getting like tons of invites like that. And the one that is actually going to say that, hey, I want to help you in some way, right? Or I want to learn a little bit more. I know your time is really valuable. How could I add value? How could I, basically something different, not just, hey, here's my resume, here's my portfolio, you guys hiring, right? There are like 100 other people saying that, right? So you want to stand out and also, basically show that you want to add value, not you want to give. That's why the name of the book is Give and Take, right? So you want to also give, not just take. So another quick question, then we'll be wrapping up. Because I know it's been quite some time already. In your experience, Lacey, so what do you think were some of your biggest mistakes and lessons during this search and interviewing process?
I think for interviewing, some things, I think I wouldn't necessarily call it a mistake, but I think I could have improved by talking about more diverse projects instead of like focusing on the one that I like the best, like thinking about like, even if that's just from experience from past work that's not directly UX related, being able to like speak to different situations can set you apart instead of just one. I'm trying to think what else. Also, yeah, tailoring it to the interviewer. If there's any way you can look up the person that's interviewing you, or at least look into the company and find and like look at like what's their vision statement, what are their values, like, and making sure that you try and hit on those points if it makes sense with the answers in your questions, I think is one thing to think about, because it's so easy to just be like, oh, I'll figure it out, or I'll just say what I always say. But it's, if you're actually getting an interview, like they'll notice when you put the extra effort. Also, like with the job search, I know it's so easy to like just apply to 100 jobs on a job board and then be like, well, I'm doing all I can, like, and that goes back to the 2-hour job search book that Michael mentioned. Like there's more focused ways to strategize your job search instead of just, like being another resume and in a black hole of hundreds of resumes in some cases. And it's so hard to get noticed when so many other people are applying. It helps you, having more of a strategy to stand out, I think that was a mistake that I made in the beginning, where I was just applying, but it's like, no, let me take a step back. Let me see if I can network or reach out to people, or if I can, even like my friends, like even if they don't work for a technology company, they might work for a company that has a UX team, like let me see if I can utilize them for a referral. Referrals are huge if you can get them. Like, like you're better off applying to one job with a referral than 100 jobs with no referral. Like you're more likely to hear back from that one job than you are to hear back from those 100 jobs that you didn't have a referral. So yeah, really like utilizing your network, not just applying and sending your resume into a black hole. And even if you do send your resume out or you apply to a job, like finding a way to follow up, like trying to find who the recruiter is or who the hiring manager is, and just find a way to stand out from the crowd, I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Lacey. That was great. So any other questions from our amazing, wonderful audience? Like anything else you wanted to learn but haven't learned yet, anything else that is not clear about getting your first job? Feel free to use the chat and then we'll wrap up in a second. So this is your last chance to ask the question. I know we're addressed pretty much. So there is also another question from Baba Jida, but I'm a little bit confused, Baba Jida, about this, because you mentioned in the coming years, what new UX tools and trends would you like to experience in the UX industry? So if you're asking to predict the trends, I mean, of course, that's going to be like speculation, but feel free to clarify your question. Like, what are you referring to? Or like, what new tools you expect to take off? Or, I mean, my take would just be simple, like the AI tools and much more usage of those in the UX field to basically be more productive and predict the new, sorry, I see the clarification. You should predict the new tools to take off. Yeah, well, it's hard to predict, right? They're not profits, so it's might be a little difficult. But Lacey, any thoughts on this? Like any new tools you think that might take off?
There's one tool that I really like. I don't know if it's something that's going to take off, but it might be useful to anyone here too, that I use a lot, that I could see being really big. It is an AI tool. It's called Text Cortex, and it's super helpful because unlike ChatGPT, it doesn't have like knowledge of everything since 2023 or whatever it has. It's a tool where you can actually upload documents, and then that creates a knowledge base, and then you can ask it questions and it'll give you answers based off of just the information you uploaded. And I have found that so helpful. Like if a client sends you like a long PDF or document, I feel like uploading it and then asking the AI questions and answer it based off of the document has like saved me so much time. And I haven't really heard too much. I mean, this is just my own experience. I haven't heard too much about people using, like, I've heard ChatGPT a lot, but I haven't heard too much about people creating their own knowledge bases. But I could see that just being something huge that everyone starts doing. But that's my personal thing, just because I love using that, and I haven't really heard too much about anybody else who's used it.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, thank you, Lacey. That sounds like you're really useful, right? So it's basically yeah, and I see Bai is asking in the chat, what is the name again? What was it? Text Cortex?
Yeah, let me just find the link and I'll send that in there. And they have a free version. I started paying for it because I was using it so much that I like used up all my free points. But if you're not using it that often, like the free version should be fine. And I mean, I don't imagine it's gonna stay free, but I hope it does. Let me see. Hold on.
Yeah, if you want, you can just put the name in the chat. That's fine. Don't worry about the link. Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah, it's
can
called
find it.
Text Cortex.
Okay, okay, all right. So Lacey, before we wrap up, anything else you want to, any other words of wisdom you want to share with folks looking for their first jobs, for first UX jobs, anything else you want to quickly share?
Yeah, I know that it's a really tough market right now, especially for people who are trying to break into the field. But honestly, don't give up. And like something that a recruiter told me is that right now it's slow busy, so it's maybe not like as many jobs as during the big boom during the pandemic, but there are still consistently jobs like popping up every single day related to the UX industry. And there's a lot more opportunities now because there's more virtual jobs. So even if it's in another state, you have more jobs that you can apply to. So don't give up. And there's still junior and associate positions popping up. Just I would recommend networking, especially if you're first starting out. Networking will really go a long way. And I do feel that this is just temporary. That it being like kind of not the best market for UX right now, because like I said, people who know AI are going to be taking jobs, not AI taking the jobs. So there's as AI continues to grow, I predict my personal prediction that there's going to be a lot more UX jobs coming in the future that are related to AI and emerging technologies that are either don't exist yet or that are still being developed right now. So there's always opportunity, and yeah, just because tech right now is maybe a little bit slower, other industries aren't, and they also need UX people. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, you can go to other industries that are hiring and that aren't doing big tech layoffs, and you might find opportunities there.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think based on what I read, I don't remember the exact stats, but it's almost something like 60% of tech jobs are outside of tech companies or something like that.
I
Don't
wouldn't be
quote,
surprised.
yeah,
Yeah.
don't quote me on it, but it's I remember reading something like that. So yeah, and then definitely AI tools. I think Nielsen also talks about it as like being a new type of interface almost, right? So, and basically there will be a lot of demand for, as Lacey was saying, um, for folks doing UX for those AI products.
I'm already seeing it a lot in my current job. Like, almost every project I work on, the client wants some sort of AI something incorporated. So it's getting bigger and bigger.
All right. All right, so thank you so much, Lacey. This was awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed the event and got some great insights. As promised, right? So people asked us about our program. So as promised earlier, gonna give you make a special announcement about that, and also share this roadmap that we talked about earlier. So let me quickly tell you about the program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of you to not just build a very strong real client portfolio and real work experience, but also get the crucial softer skills like team collaboration, client management, and presentation, along with career prep to master UX job search and interviewing, so you can actually start getting invites and then are able to get offers. So who the program is best for? The program is the best fit for ambitious people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, a tech, or related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most effective and efficient ways, and without quitting their current jobs or other commitments. So we're pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. So what exactly is BeginX? It's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition into UX. We ran quite a few cohorts by now. So for a few years, helped about 160 people or so transition into UX. And alumni of the program have been hired by companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, ABC News, Meta, JP Morgan, many more. The program was also ranked by SwitchUp as a best UX program and also featured in Fortune magazine and ADP list. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, American Express, The Economist, and a few others. What you gain after completing the program is build not just the hard skills, but the critical softer skills that I just talked about, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and master UX job search and interviewing so you can actually land a UX job. In fact, our grads have done so well that we also offer a money-back guarantee. So you either land a UX job or get your tuition back plus an extra $500. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more on beginx.com, and Mika is going to paste a link to the consultation as well. The next cohort starts quite soon on May 29th, and our cohorts are quite small and fill up quickly. So please act soon if you want to become marketable by basically by beginning of the fall, while others are having vacations. So also, to thank everyone in our community who attended this event, you'll be eligible for a $600 tuition credit if accepted into the program. To claim that credit, what you need to do is by this Friday, so tomorrow, go to the website. You'll see the link in the chat once again, and request a free, no commitment career transition consultation, or you could just apply or get request program info. And by the way, just to clarify, our consultations are designed to not just be some like quick program pitch, but actually provide you an opportunity for you to learn about UX career transition best practices and pitfalls to avoid, get some guidance, personalized advice, and ask questions about your own UX career switch and how the program can help, and see if you may be a good fit for it. All right. So in addition to mentioning the program, I also wanted to mention that we frequently run different types of virtual events. So we'll keep you guys updated about the upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent every few weeks or so. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to our wonderful guests for taking the time to join us and provide all the valuable insights. It was a huge pleasure to have you here, and we'll see you at our future events.